This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online voice of MHS with Joe Stibich. I'm Itai Kalegi. A lot to get to today. First, we're really excited. We're going to be joined by Alan Johnson and talk to him. He's the Metuchen resident who appeared on Jeopardy as a contestant last week. So we'll talk to him about his experience on that show. And then Josh Hyman and I will talk about all the latest in winter athletics, including the boys and girls basketball teams that are approaching the pods next week for postseason play, and the hockey team finishing up a tough season but looking to build heading into next year. But before that, here are the announcements from Joe Stibich.
Thank you, Eddie. This week, the Metuchen School District virtually distributed wellness surveys to all students and parents to get feedback about the current hybrid and remote learning system. If you have not already done so, complete the survey, which can be found in your school email. Powder Puff jersey name requests are due by March 9th. The game itself is scheduled to take place on Friday, March 26th. Finally, a reminder that spring sports physicals for students with last names ending in M through Z are Thursday, March 11th, between 8:30 and 10:30 a.m. at the high school. That's all for the announcements. Back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Joe, and let's move into our interview with Alan Johnson. Here on the MHS Podcast, Itai Geller alongside Itai Geller and Julia Hirschfield. Last week, the Brainy Borough truly lived up to its moniker as a Metuchen resident appeared on Jeopardy, the famous trivia show, for the first time since 1986. We are joined by that man now with his Jeopardy champion balloons behind him, Alan Johnson. Thanks so much for joining us today on the MHS Podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
All right, so just to get right into things, before we discuss your time on the game show, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I actually went to the same high school as James Holzhauer. For Jeopardy fans who remember him, I think he has all 10 of the top 10 records for daily winnings. He was actually a year ahead of me in high school, but I don't necessarily, I knew who he was, but I don't know if we actually knew each other or had classes together because it was a giant high school. But yeah, and then I don't know how much detail to get into, but I went to college at Iowa State and then moved to the East Coast for grad school. I guess the first time I lived in Jersey was when I went to Princeton for my master's program, and I've been on the East Coast ever since. My wife and I moved down to Metuchen about 4 years ago when our first daughter was on the way, because my wife grew up in New Brunswick, and we moved down here to be close to her parents to help us with watching our daughter while we're working. So that's about 4 years ago, and I don't think either of us had spent much time in Metuchen before then, but we've come to really love this town and plan on raising our kids here. So
well, that's great to hear, but let's shift gears now to the show itself. So when did you first develop an interest in Jeopardy, and so much so that you wanted to eventually appear on the show?
Yeah, so I've been a fan of Jeopardy since I was probably younger than all of you. I'm sure probably middle school, I would imagine, is when I started watching Jeopardy. Probably as I started to be able to answer some of the questions correctly and started to have enough general knowledge, which I'm guessing would be middle school or high school or something like that. And I wanted to do teen tournament, but I didn't know. I guess in those days I didn't even know how you applied for that. So that kind of passed me by. Then there's college tournament. I actually used to be a teacher. There's teachers tournament, but I never got to do any of those things. So I've entered the contestant process pretty much every year, and finally got the call last year. So
what is the application process like?
Yeah, so it starts off with a 50-question test, and they don't exactly say what the criteria is for qualifying, but the rumor has it if you score 35 or higher, then you just go into a lottery. I guess that's so that maybe there are people who ace all 50 questions or whatever, but I don't think they want to go through all of those contestants all in 1 year. So I think they're just trying to find a mix of contestants, that some of which were going to be Hall of Famers and some of which were just going to be like me and regular contestants. And so then you go into, if you get picked out of that lottery, you go into the next stage. It's another 50 question test, same deal. Then you do a audition where you kind of play a mock game, where I think they're really just trying to make sure that you know like what you're doing, you know, an answer in the form of a question, and that like once you're on the show that you'll kind of, you know, you'll look like you know how to play, I think essentially. And then you go into the contestant pool, and from there, like they'll give you a call if they want to book you for a match. But a lot of people go into the contestant pool and still don't get called, and then you go back to square one. So it's a long process. I think they told us that 250,000 people took the online test, and 400 people appeared on the show. So it's like significantly less than like 1%, which is kind of wild.
Yes, so the day finally came for you to shoot and play Jeopardy with Ken Jennings as the host. Tell me, what did you enjoy most about the day, and what surprised you most being there, being that you've watched the show for so long and we're finally part of it?
I mean, I would have to say winning was probably the most enjoyable part of the day. I don't know, winning and like actually playing the match and feeling like I was doing a good job of like, you know, of what I had spent like months preparing for and like many years hoping to like one day be able to do. So yeah, I think that was probably the most like gratifying part of the day. I think as far as surprising, there weren't a whole lot of surprises because I did a lot of research on what the experience was going to be like, because I wanted to, you know, as much as like it would be nice to go in and just be like, oh, I just want to experience everything and have it feel spontaneous. Like I was very much there to compete, so I wanted to try and demystify it as much as possible. So I guess the one thing I would say that like maybe I didn't realize is like there would be retakes of the reads of the clues in every break. So, you know, there's the commercial break, and then they do like, you know, the interview segment. Before they would go into the interviews, they do rereads of like anything that they wanted to correct. So when you're watching on TV, like everything that happens after the clue is done being read, when the contestants can buzz in and answer, that's like exactly as it happened in the studio. Like they don't want to do anything that changes like the gameplay or the outcome. But for anything that is like, you know, that's not like a crucial part of the gameplay, like they're able to do like retakes of those tiny things. So I guess those are all the things that make it so that you know, from a viewer's perspective, it always looks like a perfect like thing end to end. So it's kind of cool to see the TV magic at play.
So the town response was astounding to your time on Jeopardy, with Mayor Jonathan Bush even declaring last Thursday Alan Johnson Day. Did you receive more positive feedback and praise than you initially expected?
Yes. I mean, I was also kind of like somewhat prepared for the, you know, for it to be like a, you know, of like public interest or whatever, or like, you know, sort of a 15 minutes of fame type thing. But I think even it still kind of like exceeded like my expectations. And I would have to say maybe the one thing that I found really gratifying is that, you know, as much as, I don't know, it's not really in like my nature to like be like, I don't know, to like pump myself up or like self-promotional or like brag or whatever. But, you know, you're only on Jeopardy once. And so I was like, I kind of, you know, pushed myself out of like maybe more like, you know, tendency to just like not talk about myself that much, to promote my appearance and like and I think it was really clear to me that like it brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, you know, people for being in the same town as me or going to the same college as me or, you know, working at the same company as me or whatever. Like it was definitely like a moment that that I felt like I could share the joy that I felt with a lot of people, and especially, you know, in the you know, a year into the pandemic, it was just like really wearing on people. It was nice to be able to bring some joy to folks.
All right, so to wrap things up, what is some advice you have for high school students who would like to participate on a game show like Jeopardy, or simply for those who need that extra push to follow their dreams in general?
Yeah, I would say be endlessly curious. So I think that's what served me well, both for the answers I did know and the answers I didn't know. So, for example, the first daily double that I got was like basically what was the name of like the central like avenue in a fair, like from the Chicago World's, like I guess a term coined at the Chicago World's Fair. The answer was Midway, which didn't come to me, and I don't even know. I know some things it's like they don't come to you because you just don't think of them quickly enough, or it's some you just don't know. And I can't really remember like did I or didn't I know that, but I didn't think of it quickly enough. But after after that daily double was over, like I started thinking about like Chicago and Midway. We have Midway Airport. The Bears are known as the monsters of the Midway. I've heard this my entire life, and like it's like I think had I bothered to like look that up at some point, then it might have been something I would have known. And so I mean, a lot of Jeopardy is not so much like what can you study. It's just like what are the things you've been curious enough to look into, and it served me well in terms of like getting on the show and winning an episode. But I think that kind of like constant curiosity has been something that's like rewarded me throughout my whole life.
Well, certainly, Alan, you made the town proud last week appearing on Jeopardy. We wish you best of luck on your future endeavors, and thanks so much for joining us today. I thought it would be perfect after you talked about in your first interview segment about how much of an avid fan of podcasts you are. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to get you on here, so we really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite, and good luck to you all in your studies and all the things that you're thinking about doing.
All right, well, thanks so much. Coming up, Josh and I will talk winter athletics. For Julia Hirschfield and Itai Geller, I'm Eddie Kalegi. This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online voice of MHS.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sport-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Josh Hyman. The winter sports season is winding down, and while it's been very different, it has been successful for some of Metuchen's teams. We'll start with the girls' basketball team. Despite having a small roster, the girls have played well this year. Who's led the way, and how are they looking to head into the postseason pods?
Well, Molly Malague has been huge for this team, averaging 15 points per game. Broadcast the game with the Bulldog Report last week when she got to 1,000 career points on February the 17th against Denellen. Of course, that was a big moment. Senior Chase Claiborne, who's the only senior on the team, she's been strong too, averaging 14 points per game. Same goes for forward Aurelie Germain, averaging 7 points per game. Fellow forward Carly Pachalski leading the team with 7 rebounds per game. So a lot to be excited about for this girls team. They have a small roster, only 9 players, only 8 are varsity exclusive, yet they've played really well. They're sitting 8-3. We're recording this as of Thursday the 25th. They're 8-3 with 2 games to go, and they should be in position to get at least 1 home game in the pods, maybe even 2, maybe not that, but at least 1. So they should be in a nice position right now. Should be very happy, despite having a small roster and a young team, to be playing this well in what is a pretty talented blue division, especially at the top. They've struggled against Middlesex, but teams like Denellen, Spotswood, South River, teams that don't really have huge holes, they're playing pretty well against.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's good to mention Malague getting into that 1,000-point club a few games ago. And as a junior, matter of fact, I think that is incredibly impressive, especially for somebody who still has a year left to play. You don't really see that often. It's been a while since we've had somebody for the girls join the 1,000-point club. And for their next two games, their last two games, I think they're in a really good spot. South River may be a tough opponent, but they're also playing Highland Park. As you know, the girls beat them 80-36 last time. Last time they beat them, that was away at Highland Park. So I think this girls team going into their last few games of the season is in a really good spot to probably do some damage in the pods. And moving on to the boys basketball team, they have been strong as well, especially with Dom Schiappa now healthy and contributing. How can they end their season on a high note?
Well, yeah, overall, it's been a really good year for both teams. The boys have played well. They've had a couple of tough losses, but, Coach Jensen overall has been happy with his team, a whole bunch of seniors. He's got a lot of contributions. He's got a deep roster, too, which is nice in this pandemic year. We've had players opt out all over the county, all over the state, all over the country. But the Bulldogs are still with their same core of guys. Yes, they were without Dom Schiappa for 4 games, 3 of which he was out with a foot injury. He also sat out opening night because they wanted to get him more reps before he could get on the court. But he's back now. He's playing really well, averaging 15 points a game. Michael Piavoso, a senior, though, has been a huge standout and maybe a bit of a surprise as well. He was scoring at a decent clip last season, about 10 points per game, but that has skyrocketed to 16 points per game. And this is someone who was a point guard last year, supposed to be the one who's passing the ball around. Yeah, the Bulldogs are still sharing the ball, but he's also getting his fair share of opportunities to shoot. And he's done a great job with it. He's shooting well from the outside. He's able to work it inside. And then, of course, Luke Schleck, who's kind of altered his game a little bit. He's not really working it inside. Josh, you've seen with me when we've broadcasted, he's typically out around the 3-point range. And aside from one game, I think it was against Denellen, that he was covered pretty well. All other games, he's been a laser beam from downtown. And then Jai Dreher as well has had multiple games where he's had 18-plus rebounds this season. He's played really well, getting double-doubles. So the senior's playing well, as expected. Also got to give a shout-out to Aidan Ahmed, a junior who has ascended into the starting lineup this season. He was initially there instead of Dom Schiappa, but with Piavoso taking on that scoring role, Ahmed became the point guard and Piavoso shifted to the 2 guard. And Ahmed's done a great job passing the ball around and also in the defensive end, leading the team in steals. So Metuchen, very diverse team, really strong in a lot of different ways, and they should be happy with how it's going this year. And same position as the girls. They're sitting 3rd right now in the GMC Blue Division. They've got a good chance to potentially get one of those home pod games, which would be huge because now that fans are back, you get to have a home playoff game in front of some parents. It's still nice, and it really is a good way to cap off the year for all these seniors.
Yeah, definitely. And I think going back to the record, they've been pretty good. They had that unfortunate 3-game loss streak, that wasn't that great, but the games were close where they did lose. So, but it is good that they won against Spotswood to break that. And like you said, Eddie, they do have a bit of everything when it comes to this team. They have guys that can shoot from out long, like Luke Schleck. They have guys that can steal, rebound, play really good defense, set up nice plays, and they have that depth on the bench with players like Max Cohn, who may go a bit underappreciated on the scoreboard, but definitely does his job, setting up those plays and arranging the baskets. And another thing that I think is also really important to mention, I think that Metuchen also has, 3 players that are averaging above 15 points, with Dom Schiappa, Luke Schleck, and I believe Mike Piavoso. So that's at least, 45 points a game. That's incredible to have 3 kids that are averaging such high scoring potentials. So I think if they just keep trudging ahead, get more confident under the basket, just get a bit tougher, I think they could really go far in the pods as well as the girls team. So now we're going to shift it over to the Edison Metuchen hockey team. How did they fare this year, and how can they improve for next season?
It was a tough year for this team. I mean, they ended the year winless. They were coming off of a nice year. They had gone 8-14, which I believe last year was their 3rd year since Edison High School, JP, and Metuchen all combined here into this one team. But it's got to be tough after you seemed like you were building some progress, and then it kind of just completely went backwards right here. Nonetheless, I wouldn't be too upset about it. There were some tough games this year, and of course, this was just a very unique season. But Coach Russell Berner, in his first season as the head coach of this team, he's going to lose some seniors like Jake DeVito from Metuchen, to just to name one. There's a few others from the Edison schools as well, but there's a lot of younger talent on this team, and you want to see hockey continue to build. Because obviously, none of these three schools had the commitment to ice hockey to have their own singular teams. But you'd hope with three schools together that they can kind of get enough talent to be respectable and ultimately compete against some of those really strong hockey programs nearby, such as JFK, Kearney, Woodbridge, Colonia, just to name a few. So got to feel pretty good. Heading forwards, there is some signs of life. They had some nice production from their juniors. Itai Geller here from the podcast had a couple of goals this season. Thomas Calantoni, Luke Longo. Those are the three Metuchenites who are juniors that will be seniors next year. There's others at Edison and JP who will play similar roles. Other thing to note, they had a really tough schedule this year. They had to play St. Joe's. They had to play Woodbridge twice. Those are three games you are not winning, no matter how much talent you have on those teams. We all know, the stigma against St. Joe's and how difficult they can be to beat in sports. And Woodbridge, their hockey team, has been one of the best in Central Jersey in recent years. So when you have 1/3 of your schedule against those teams, that's not really a good omen for what's to come the rest of the season. But 0-9, tough year, yes, but there's still some bright spots heading towards the future. And this is still a new team. They've still only had this program going for 4 years. Hopefully they can find some more young hockey stars that want to play in high school and keep this thing going. And next year, hopefully in a full season, they can bounce back.
Yeah, definitely a frustrating time for this hockey team. And the circumstances surrounding this year definitely have not made it easier. But, there is still hope for this team in the future. They do have some really talented guys coming through the ranks in terms of juniors and sophomores. And the program is growing, it's expanding, it's, trying to work out all the kinks that obviously comes with a new program. On top of that, it's I believe 3 different schools, correct?
Yes, it's Edison, JP, and Metuchen.
Yeah, so that is just compounding the problem just astronomically. So it was a tough year just in general. So obviously the record will reflect that a bit. And obviously you said their teams that they're playing were just notoriously brutal. But I still, like you said, there is still hope for these team. They do have scores. They have competent guys. They have the future in this program. So I'm really eager to see if this team can start getting on its feet in the next few seasons. Unfortunately, we might not be around to see it, but I do wish these guys the best for their future seasons. And is there anything else happening in MHS sports that we should talk about?
Well, first off, just with other teams, swimming, they have started to get off the ground. They've had some practices. There have been some schools who have started with some meets. Got to see what's to come for the swim team, but nice to see they've at least gotten to get some practice started. Of course, we've alluded to it. The track team, you guys have been able to start some practice. You've had a lot of shoveling, but nonetheless, you have still been able to get together over these past few weeks and hopefully start progressing towards the spring. And wrestling is actually going to be the next sport to get started that we'll be able to talk about more on our next show. But their first meet is March 17th at home. St. Patrick's Day should be a fun one against St. Thomas Aquinas. So the winter season moved to the spring season, and right now everything's all set and in gear for wrestling to happen this year. So excited for that. Everything else, spring sports, track, baseball, softball, golf, and boys tennis all set to begin in mid-April per the NJSIA guidelines. But 2 other things I want to talk about. First, I sort of alluded to, and Josh, we could talk about this a little bit because you've been there for the basketball games. About a week and a half ago, Governor Murphy allowed parents to begin attending sporting events, and you've noticed already that these players from Metuchen, for both the boys and the girls, have been able to feed off that energy. These parents, especially for the seniors that want to see their kids play, it's great that they've been able to put in the health and safety protocols necessary to make it possible that they can be there and see their children play for maybe the final time in their respective sport, at least for a couple of games. And it's been nice to see that, the gym isn't completely empty anymore. It was kind of ominous watching these games and hearing so much the whistle or the yell of a coach or the squeak of a sneaker could just echo in the gym. And now it's not much, 20 to 25 people, but it's still something. It's still a crowd, and it's still something there to energize you while the parents get to see their kids play.
Yeah, definitely. I think the crowd is really what, I guess, lack of a better term, makes it official. Like when there's no crowd there, it really doesn't feel any different from like a scrimmage or a practice, so to say. And I can speak from a bit of experience when we had our soccer games, when we didn't really have many parents in the crowd, it kind of felt weird. It kind of felt like we were just scrimmaging the JV team or just having an inter-squad practice. But when we had those big events, when we had a lot of classmates and parents showing up, it did feel special. It just elevated it to the next level of energy, and it motivates the guys in the team to put on a good show for the home crowd. You know how that feels. And although it is a limited capacity, it is still it's still a great thing that these kids can have some sort of audience to play in front of. And especially like you said, it's for a lot of these kids, it's going to be their last few games ever playing basketball. So, it is good to have some sort of normalcy in those last few games of your career.
Yeah, so the other thing I also wanted to talk about is we're expected to have a few more, but right now we're getting a lot of athlete commitments over these past few months that we haven't really mentioned on the podcast, but we've got to give some congratulations to some of these seniors who have set in stone where they will be attending college and furthering their athletic and academic endeavors. Couple going to Rutgers, Noel Leaf for field hockey, Matt Rowe for baseball. Matt Rowe finalized his a while back, and he's another Metuchen baseball player heading to the Big Ten, a big-time conference, following the footsteps of Jay Harry, who's currently at Penn State. For Noel Leaf, of course, she's been playing field hockey for a long time. Two-time reigning GMC Conference Player of the Year. We know she'll do great at Rutgers. Bridget Thomas, she's really strong swimmer these last few years for the girls swim team. She's going to Towson University in Maryland, so congratulations to her. And also Isabel Wiener, another field hockey player, Noel Leaf's co-captain this season. She's going to be playing at Rowan University. There's a few others coming. I know I heard from Coach Kegel that Tyler Haynes is in between two schools right now for his wrestling commitment. And there's probably a few others that are still coming as well in these next couple of months. But it's nice to see that these students are trying to balance academics and athletics, and it ultimately pays off. Of course, we both know, Josh, we're seniors, we're currently in the college application process, but when you're able to use your athletics to help you out to get into a school, for a school that wants you not just as a student, but also as an athlete for your sport, it has to be such a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're an athlete, you're representing that school, and you got to wear that with pride, and it just pushes you to another level of just bringing out the best in yourself. And I think it's really great that these kids are getting a chance to go to college to do something they love, not only with academics, but with, something they're truly passionate about. And another thing I noticed what's interesting about our school is that not only do we send a lot of these kids to play sports, but we also send a surprising amount to Ivy League schools. I don't know, we had at least, 3 or 4 kids in last class going to Ivy Leagues. And I think it's really great that we can have both a really well performing athletically and and in academics. It really shows that you can do both if you really put your mind to it.
And it's always important to have that balance for a district, and especially being such a small town that we've been able to do both of those things is really nice to see. But that's going to just about wrap up today's show. A thank you to our guests today, Alan Johnson, for joining us today on the podcast. For Joe, Julia, Itai, and Josh Hyman, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off. We'll see you next time right here on the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS.